Hi, everyone. Fiona Pearman and Kate Borer speaking to you this month about executive presence. And Kate, we've talked a lot about individuals and how they can have more executive presence and places they can practice and things they can do. And this week we thought we'd dig into what organisations can do to really support the women in their world, women who report to them, women around them, to have more executive presence, what they maybe want to try and do, and how they can show up in a way that really lands their contribution and all they're capable of.
Yeah, I think a lot of the conversations we have in this forum really talk about resourcing women to really influence, to get in the driver's seat, to, own their own destiny, really, and to navigate, the dynamics that they're in. And we are huge advocates. That's where our work sits. But equally, we're huge advocates and supporters of work being done on the system. And so, part of that sits in organisations, part of that sits, in community and in government policy, etc. And so equally, when we think about, how do organisations start to create environment where perhaps it's a little bit easier, there's some coaching, there's some support, there's some clarity around what's expected of them. On some level, it feels, we know that creates the conditions that helps particularly some women overcome the roadblocks that often, get in the way of them showing up with the sort of presence they would like to.
Yeah, there's so many ways in which organisations and leaders can start to foster this quality. And usually it is that you already have people who are high performing, they're achieving, they're actually delivering good quality work. And so it's important to start noticing the places where they're not doing what you would love them to do, and they're not having that presence or impact that they could have. And I think the first thing we often talk about in this realm, particularly when we're working with organisations and leaders, is say, let's get really clear on the expectations you have in this particular dynamic. So if you're bringing someone in, if you're wanting them to be a subject matter expert, if you're wanting them to comment or ask questions in a certain meeting, make sure they're briefed and prepared and you've told them what it is you expect of them. And equally, if you're really wanting them to be an observer in a meeting and just to get some exposure and some experience, make sure that's really clear for them. And they're not feeling awkward about sitting on the edge and not saying something. And also the other people in the room know that their function in this particular dynamic is just to observe. And I think the more clear we get about this, the easier it is to provide certainty for people, and the more likely they are to step into, being willing to share a little bit or to do something a little bit different than what they've done in the past.
Yeah, I think the catch here is we're often making assumptions, right? We're often assuming that people know what's expected of them. And in my experience, a lot of that is implied. And so that's where there's this gray area. We're in a room and is it my place? Do I have permission? There's a lot of things that will get in the way of, your leaders perhaps showing up the way they may like to. And so being explicitly clear, specifically, what would they be doing different? Hey, it would be great. And give them examples. It would be great if you, gave some feedback or shared, I know you've got some great insight in this area. It would be really helpful for you to share that with the room. These are specific, explicit points of certainty that allow that person to show up with safety and allow them to share or ask that question. And I think, importantly, the examples are really valuable because all of a sudden they've got real certainty around what they need to do. I think that talks to the second point, which is encourage small acts of confidence. So where you notice opportunities, those specific examples. Hey, we're going into this meeting tomorrow. I know you've done all the legwork on the paper. I'd really love for you to lead the conversation and you to share, lots of the detail. Of course, I'm responsible, I'm accountable. I've presented the paper to Exco, but I'd really love in this dynamic for you to be able to talk to some of the key points. And just checking in, notice when someone is uncomfortable, supporting them and asking good questions. Is there anything you need from me in order to feel comfortable to be able to do that? Just those sorts of short, sharp dialogues can be really powerful for creating conditions that allows that person to step in and take those small acts of confidence that will probably feel courageous for them, but will make it a little bit more easier in the end as compared to not having that sort of a conversational support.
Yeah, I love this opportunity that, all of us have with people in our world, and particularly those who report to us or are more junior and that sort of thing, to really foster and encourage them being willing to do one thing differently. We often say, don't make it such a big step that it feels, out of bounds and it feels too scary for them to do it. Really help them identify what's the one small act of confidence I could do in this meeting or in this dynamic. What's the one thing I could ask of the stakeholder that are present in order to get some more information, some more intel? What's the one thing I could share? And the more we encourage people to do this, and it will feel a little bit scary for them if they're not comfortable at the moment, the first time of doing that, they'll have all sorts of butterflies in their stomach. Potentially they feel almost nauseous. And it's hard to remember that we were once like that, maybe, back earlier in our career. And just giving them the support to know you're there and you've got their back as they're taking these small acts of confidence can be incredibly resourcing and allow them to do something and to know, it's going to be okay. Even if it doesn't go perfectly, even if it's a little bit clunky, it's better to have said something and contribute in some way than to have just been silent.
Yeah, I think number 3 is all about encouraging them to be authentic. We know from working with hundreds of women, this piece around who should I be, and this links to the first one, right, what's expected of me, can really be a tricky and complex kind of web as we're showing up in, these dynamics that aren't particularly familiar to us. So really supporting them to show up as their authentic self, that they don't need to be someone else. They don't need to compare themselves to you or perhaps any other charismatic leader in the room, that their job is to show up, to be themselves. We often refer to this as reveal more of who they are.
Yes, we're really wanting you to help them value the skills and capability and strengths they already have, because this is so powerful in providing them with the grounding and the permission to take that small act of confidence. When you have faith in who they authentically are and what they already know and what they can contribute, they are more likely to feel that in themselves. And then they will take that small risk. They'll do something differently. And I love this piece around you acknowledging they're already enough. So it's not so much they need to do something different, which is often what's talked about in this. You need to, talk in a different way or have a different tone or do something that feels really outside people's authentic self. Once we acknowledge, actually, you're enough as it is, you've got what it takes, share more of that, and that will actually be really valuable to whatever we're trying to achieve or to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think the piece before we close that out is, and just calibrating the feedback, right? Because yes, there is sometimes, some people can waffle, or, there's coaching to be able to support us to be clear and articulate and land our message. And so of course there's coaching opportunities there, and it's just calibrating the coaching opportunities versus the pieces where actually, and this is a big one in terms of English as a second language. We know, I coach a lot of women in that space, and often very self-conscious around their accent. And the feedback I give them regularly is, just slow down a little bit. But, we are very good. Organizations in Australia, particularly, full of multicultural, diverse accents, diverse people. And so, just put that to the side, like just be your authentic self. That's who you are. That's the part of the brilliance that you bring, the strengths, the capabilities, your cultural diversity. It's part of your value proposition. So show up with that. And be conscious of, clarity and how your messages are landing as well. So I think there's a really, we don't want to lose the opportunities to coach, but equally really maintaining, and encouraging people to show up as their authentic self is really powerful.
Yeah, I love this conversation. I think the more organisations are willing to lean into it and to do something different, the more we're going to get people showing up with that executive presence we'd love to see.